actually, I had a message on my machine when we used to have answering machines, and it was about an audition with, it was garbled. I thought it said Bob Weir. Bob Weir, 5 p.m., studio instrumentals, stage 6, we'll see you there. And I thought, well, what is this? I have no idea who this is or why they're calling me. I thought it was Bob Weir. I called the number back and I said, you know, what's the deal? And they said, oh, it's Bob Welch. And it wasn't Bob himself, but the management office. And I said, oh, Bob Welch from Fleetwood Mac. I'm very familiar with Bob Welch and Fleetwood Mac. I'm a huge fan. I got all the records. I know Bob Welch very well. You know of him very well. So they said, well, yeah, we got you down for 5 o'clock tonight. And didn't anybody, have you not talked to anybody yet? And I was like, no, I don't, this is the first I've heard of it. So it was a woman on the phone. She said, well, you better run out to the record store and pick up Bob just put out his first solo album. And of course, this is right after Fleetwood Mac exploded, you know, with Lindsay and Stevie and their first record and, you know, Christine and the new thing. So Bob's record's out and I run up to the store and I get the record and I try and get a few things and I run down to SIR with my SG and I walk into the door and Bob's standing there with a bass around his shoulder and Mick Fleetwood sitting behind a drum kit. And it was just the coolest thing in the world because we all kind of hit it off. And of course, you know, I'd always been a fan of Mick Fleetwood and an admirer of his tenacity because I have the first record. It's in my collection. I've shedded, you know, Peter Green. I got Fleetwood Mac Blues Jam in Chicago records. I have Kiln House. I got Bare Trees. I have them all. And always a big admirer of the fact that Fleetwood and McVie and John McVie had this awesome rhythm section. They were kind of amazing shufflers and bluesmen. You know, they're huge reverence to this form and brought that to Fleetwood Mac and kept it going through all these trials and not quite making it, and then Peter Green quits, and then Bob Welch comes in, and then Christine McVie joins, and Danny Corwan, and Jeremy, you know, it's just, and then finally they put all that together. I remember when I first, what was their first hit? Maybe it was it Don't Stop? I don't know, but it was a shuffle. You know, they were like shuffling along and I went, they're still shuffling, you know, but it's like, it's a huge hit. That's cool. We jammed for a couple hours and we just hit it off. And the three of us, I guess I was the first call. I mean, it was like maybe Mick. So Mick was managing Bob at that point. And I imagine the idea was, let me help you get a band together because you got a record out and you're going to tour. Why don't we look for a guitar player first? So I guess I was, you know, one of the guitar players. And they hired me, and it struck up the beginning of a lifelong friendship, not only with Bob, but with Mick. Mick and I really kind of hit it off, probably because I was such a big fan, and I kind of, you know, so we used to hang out a lot, just, you know, jam in his basement and talk about stuff.
What do you remember about Cal Jam 2?
It was way too early in the morning. And you know, we attempted to be wide awake way too early in the morning. And when I saw the film, I thought,
how many people were
boy,
there?
we sounded like we were a little over-medicated. There was 250,000 people or something like that. It was, yeah, it wasn't Fleetwood Mac wasn't on the bill, but all kinds of bands were. And Bob was, and Mick was there, came with us, and so did Stevie Nicks came with us. And yeah, as a matter of fact, there's footage out there of one of the songs on YouTube, and Stevie's playing tambourine, and she, you know, she shared my microphone with me for my background part, and she just appeared. I don't think I remember knowing she was there, and I remember her just kind of sneaking up, and all of a sudden I went, well, okay, I guess it's your mic now. You know, He's extremely funny. He's physically a funny guy. Like, he could be an actor. He's like, I don't know how tall Mick is, probably 6'8". And, you know, his expressions and his facial stuff. So he's a funny guy, and he's an amazing drummer, and he's, you know, a huge music dude. Gosh, I don't know. Somehow I had the opportunity to be in the right place at the right time. We were pretty good friends for a while. Like I said, he would call me and go, "Come on over." I go, you know, and we'd jam in his basement. We'd talk about stuff. At one point, he had this crazy idea that he wanted to go to Africa and make a record with African kids. And I think he said, you know, I want to get a bunch of little cheap guitars and do open tuning and see if we can get like a whole bunch of these kids to play and then get some drums. Yeah, we were out of our minds at that point. It was a little late, let's say. And I said, well, look, I'll tune the guitars. You know, so if you ever get this together, I'm in. And, you know, a couple of years later, his assistant called me on the phone. Mick had moved to Australia, I think, at that point. She said, Mick asked me to call you. He has the he's going to Africa. He has a record deal, and he's going to go make a record in Africa. He wants you to go with him. You have to go get some inoculations, 8 weeks. Let's, you know, get ready. He wants you to go down to his locker and grab a few guitars to bring. Maybe listen to some African music. You're going to go to Ghana, and he wants to do a Buddy Holly song, Not Fade Away, and a few very rough sketch of what we're going to do. And it was kind of like, you know, Mick's a drummer, and he needs you to be sort of the music guy that could maybe talk notes and chords a little bit. We went to Accra, which is the capital city of Ghana. And it was extraordinary because somehow Mick had been advised to go there. There was maybe Senegal was a place, maybe Nigeria. And I think there was a musicologist professor somewhere along the line that had sat down with him and said, you should go to Ghana. And it's friendly. There's great music throughout their culture. And in Accra, it's not hard to find. And they found an old film studio. So this is crazy. By the way, right before we went, Mick brought in George Hawkins, who's a bass player, who I already knew George. George had played with Loggins and Messina and Kenny Loggins. And when I was with Hall & Oates, we did probably a good stretch of tour, Hall & Oates and Kenny Loggins on one bill. And we became buddies a little bit. Great, talented guy, super bass player, amazing singer, funniest guy in the music business, you know, best hang there is. So right before I left, Mick's got George Hawkins to come. I'm like, great, now we got a bass player and a guitar player and a drummer. We're set. So we go to Ghana, and none of us know what we're really going to do. And Accra, at that point, this was 1980, was like a place that had been through different regimes. It was a British colonized place until 1959. After that, Russians came in and kind of ran Ghana. And after that, they just became independent. And there was kind of like, it was super, there wasn't a whole lot there, man. There wasn't like a lot of running water or sewers, electricity in most of the city. We're in the city, in the capital, in Accra. And so anyhow, Mick's arranged for us to go into this Ghana Films, which was built in the 50s. They made a tourist film, apparently, at some point. And that's really all they ever did. And it was a great big warehouse, kind of like this, a soundstage, with nothing in it. And so that was our room, and we brought everything. We brought recording gear. We brought amps and guitars. Hell, we brought food. I mean, we were reading advisements that was like, do whatever you do, don't drink any of the palm wine, and don't eat any dairy, and you'll get terribly sick. Anyhow, we brought everything we needed. We had a great sound stage, and then there was a guy there. This is so crazy to talk about it. There was a guy named Faisal Helwani, who was a Lebanese guy. Had a couple of gold teeth, wore a captain's hat, and somehow drove around Accra in a Buick Electra 225 with bad shocks. And Faisal had organized a musicians union in Ghana when he heard that Fleetwood Mac was coming. And he was our guy. He was our connection to the local musics people. And he would bring bands in. And the first couple of weeks, we just went around and listened to artists and bands. We'd go to people's backyards. There were shanties and things like that. It was like a shanty town, Accra. And everything completely blew us away. It was like, to me, it was like, if you went to music heaven to explore a new world of music that you never heard or knew existed, this would be it. It just was unbelievably great. And in a place where almost everybody had almost nothing. There was this one band, and they had a guitar player who had like some kind of old Silvertone guitar with strings about that high off the neck. And he played them beautifully. And he had these singers, and the singers had skirts on with beads. And when they moved a certain way, the beads would be a part of the thing. And there was always a couple of drummers, meaning maybe somebody who played like a gourd with beads that he knocked, someone else who played a little gonji drum, and it all fit together. Anyhow, we heard all these bands, and then we brought some of them in, and sometimes we just recorded them and overdubbed, and sometimes we played together, and some of it was successful and some of it wasn't. No one ever saw a pair of headphones before. And you know what I mean? Like, we'd occasionally go like, that choir was amazing. Let's see if we can get them to put some ahs. Or, I got this part I want them to sing on my song. And it goes like this. And you get them in and play them and put headphones on. And it was like they couldn't figure it out. It was like they never had headphones. They never sang to a tape. Some of it worked, and some of it, was just, we tried and it wasn't going to work. It's really a good album. It's called The Visitor, Mick Fleetwood, The Visitor. There was even a film made out of it. It was on PBS when it came out.
Is it on YouTube somewhere?
Probably. Yeah, there are clips. Yeah. There's a clip of a children's drum troupe that'll just blow your mind if you watch it. It's because they're amazing. And it was all just crazy. There was this one band that was, the Ghanaian music, they call it high life. There's this influence of like almost a little bit of Spanish classical or lute music, what you would think is reggae music, a little bit of James Brown, it was like, but the rhythmic complexity of what was going on. I mean, George and I, Hawkins, we're trying to figure out how to play some of the instruments and how they put together those rhythms. And we were like, the white guys, like, well, the accent isn't on the 2 or the 4, it's like, and they would have these different drums and different instruments and bells, like one guy who just played cowbells. And none of them would play in the same spot at the same time. And it all fell together in this thing that would just blow you away, how beautiful it is. And, oh man, I don't know. That was in 1980. And I often wonder, what it's like there now, you know? And by the time we left, I remember there was a guy who came in, he had an instrument called a gonji, and he made me one. And I took it home, and of course it sort of fell apart after some years. It dried up and cracked. And so what I'm talking about is these guys made drums out of tree trunks and deer skins stretched over the head. And if they could find wire or something to tie the skins together with, that was a big deal. And this guy made me a gonji out of a gourd with a skin stretched across the top and a horsetail, so one big thick strand of horsetail and a stick. And a bow that was just a curved bow about that wide and another horsetail. And this dude came in and he played the blues on this. I remember we cut Rattlesnake Shake, a Fleetwood Mac song. It's on the record. And this guy came in and he was sitting there playing, and I was like, we have to get him to play his thing on this track because he's awesome, he's amazing. And you know, he couldn't quite get the headphones, and I think then we tried to play it through a speaker while he played, and it just didn't quite come together. And I think those guys were of the mind that, hey, if it doesn't come together quickly, bail. We move on. And I was like, no, don't bail. If it takes 12 hours, then let's do it. You know, that's me. Anyways, the guy made me one of those instruments, and I took it home, and it was that kind of thing. Those are the instrumentation. One day we're in the studio, and I remember I was putting new strings on my guitar. And we had this band came in. And I cut the strings off my guitar with a pair of cutters, and this guy came up to me and goes, please, don't cut the strings. I would love to have them. And he showed me his guitar. And he had strings tied in knots above the nut. Like when they break, that's what he would do. And of course, you know, once I got back home, I sent him a box of strings, you know, like 24 sets of guitar strings or something.
Some perspective.
Yeah. Oh, not only that, just people who had so little, but they were so happy. It was such a happy place to be in. And friendly and warm. But, you know, it's different. It was real education for a about 22-year-old or however old I was in 1980 to go to a country like that and, you know, spend 6 weeks. And we stayed in a diplomatic community. It's where all the embassies were. So we, you know, but everyone else lived in shanties. People would go to wells and get big buckets of water. Kids you see carrying around on their heads to take home and wash. You'd see people bathing, just sitting in front of their place. Water to cook with. It was that kind of place. And it was something to realize how much we have and how little some others have, but what a great time they were having with life. In making this music, everybody sang or danced or did something. Another thing I had, there was this little thing, George and I got them. There were small gourds about the size of, like, between a golf ball and a little smaller than a tennis ball, a gourd. And they would dry it and hollow it and then take some seeds and put them inside and put a little stick in there and a string, too. And tie them together. And you'd hold one and throw the other one over your hand. The string was just the right length so it would, you know, it would shake, and then you'd throw it and it would go and then go back. So it was like and you had to catch it with the rest of your fingers against the other one. And it was like that was move one. And we spent the whole time sick trying to get that down. somebody showed it to us and we made them for us. And then one day this little kid goes, and the musicians would laugh. They go, "Oh, those are like kids' toys." And sure enough, one of these kid drummers, had one in each hand. And he was just screaming on them and then bouncing it off walls and, anyways.